All right, we are on chapter 5 of None Dare Call It Conspiracy, titled Establishing the Establishment. This goes to 8 chapters, so we are kind of on the getting close to the home stretch. It explores the covert efforts by powerful insiders to manipulate global events for their own benefit. This is kind of the smoky room, the establishment of that smoky room. Gary Allen argues that World War I was not simply a tragic consequence of national rivalries, but rather a deliberate maneuver by an elite group to create the conditions established or necessary for establishing a world government. This chapter details key figures, organizations, and strategies involved in these efforts. It sheds light on the machinations behind the scenes. Allen begins by asserting that one of the primary motivations behind the orchestration of World War I was the desire to establish a world government. For those who sought to control international monopolies and cartels, national governments were insufficient. Global control was necessary. The armistice of November 11th, 1918 presented an opportunity for these insiders, with U.S. President Woodrow Wilson and his advisor Colonel Edward M. House leading the effort. Wilson and House's goal was to create a world government through the League of Nations. However, the post-war negotiations quickly unraveled the facade of a moral crusade, revealing that all parties were equally culpable in the war's devastation. This disillusionment reached the American public, who recoiled at the idea of entangling the United States in a world government alongside double-dealing Europeans. Without American participation, the League of Nations was rendered ineffective, as U.S. public opinion and the Senate refused to ratify the treaty that would have entangled the nation in such international commitments. Gary Allen, again the author, emphasizes the critical role of Colonel House in these events. House, a key advisor to Wilson, had already outlined his vision for America's future in his 1912 book, Philip Drew, PHILIP space DRU administrator. In his work, House presented a fictionalized plan for establishing socialism in America inspired by Karl Marx. Allen notes that House openly used the term conspiracy to describe his strategy, which involved deceiving the public about the true intentions of political candidates and manipulating the electoral process to ensure that only those aligned with his agenda were nominated. So even if we're looking at this, whether it's Republican or Democrat, it's specifically making sure that only those nominated on either side, whether it went one way or the other, it could still push towards that general sort of design behind the scenes. So, House envisioned elections as mere charades designed to placate the masses, while the real power lay in the hands of those controlling both Democratic and Republican parties. His ultimate goal was to use these parties as tools to promote the idea of world government, a plan that would continue even after the failure of the League of Nations. So we're going to talk about the Round Table again. In 1919, House met in Paris with members of a British secret society known as the Round Table. This group, inspired by the imperialist dreams of gold and diamond magnate Cecil Rhodes, sought to establish a new world order. We've heard that term before, through the creation of a world government. Rhodes's biographer, Sarah Millen, bluntly stated, "The government of the world," and this is a quote, "the government of the world was Rhodes's simple desire," closed quote. Rhodes was so committed to this idea that he set it down in a series of wills, with the first, known as the, quote, secret society will, close quote, specifically outlining his vision for extending British rule globally and preventing wars by creating a powerful, centralized authority. Rhodes modeled his secret society after the Society of Jesus, or the Jesuits, and the Masonic lodges, and organizations known for their secretive, hierarchical structures. He even brought in Lord Rothschild, a key financier, to help realize his vision. Although Rothschild was later replaced by Lord Rosebery, the organization continued to operate in the shadows, influencing British foreign policy, and eventually becoming an instrument in shaping the outcome of World War I. After the war, the Round Table's influence extended globally through the establishment of the Royal Institute of International Affairs, the RIIA, in England, and the Council of Foreign Relations, the CFR, in the United States. According to Professor Carol Quigley, these organizations were mere fronts for the same powerful insiders who had orchestrated much of the war. The CFR, in particular, became a key player in American politics, with its members including the most powerful financial dynasties of the time, such as the Rockefellers, the Kuhn Loeb and Company, Dillon Reed and Company, and the Brown brothers, Harriman. And I might be getting some of the pronunciations wrong, so I apologize for that. The CFR, which has been described as, quote, the establishment. So remember, we're fighting against the establishment. So the CFR, known as the establishment, or the invisible government, or the Rockefeller Foreign Office, was created not out of a desire to pass the time, but as a tool for these elites to further their ambitions. Its founding members included international financial insiders like Paul Warburg, Adam Schiff, Avril Harriman, Frank Vanderlip, Nelson Aldrich, Bernard Baruch, J.P. Morgan, John D. Rockefeller, and these men were instrumental in creating the Federal Reserve System and, according to Allen, also played significant roles in financing the Bolshevik Revolution. The CFR was established to shape U.S. foreign policy in a way that aligned with the interests of these powerful insiders, promoting the idea of world government while keeping their true intentions hidden from the public. Sorry, I'm having trouble spitting some of these words out. It has since become the most influential group in American politics, with its members occupying key positions in government, media, and academia. In the second part of Chapter 5, Gary Allen delves deeper into the enigmatic nature of the Council of Foreign Relations, the CFR, a group he describes as one of the most powerful and least understood organizations in America. This part opens with a rare mention of the CFR in the national press, specifically just one article from the Christian Science Monitor. This article subtly acknowledges the CFR's influence in shaping U.S. foreign policy, positioning it across the street from the Soviet embassy in the United Nations in New York, or to the United Nations in New York, a symbolic juxtaposition of power centers. Despite its formal membership, which includes approximately 1,500 of the most elite figures across various sectors, government, finance, media, education, the CFR remains largely unknown to the general public. Allen points out the striking fact that despite its nearly half-century of operations, and now it's been a century, at the highest levels of power, the CFR has managed to maintain a low profile. This anonymity is not accidental, but rather a reflection of the CFR's ability to control its narrative and shield its true influence from public scrutiny. The rarity of articles or discussions about the CFR in major national media, as Allen highlights, is a testament to its power in maintaining the veil of secrecy. So, what makes the CFR so influential? Allen argues that the organization's power lies in the ability to shape U.S. foreign policies consistently over several administrations, and that is an achievement. The Christian Science Monitor article from 1961 hints at this influence, noting that nearly half of the CFR's members have been invited to serve in official government positions or as consultants at some point in their careers. This revolving door between the CFR and the highest levels of government ensures that the policies deliberated within the walls, or its walls, often become the official stance of the United States. This influence is further corroborated by Joseph Kraft, a CFR member and columnist who in a Harper's article titled School for Statesmen admits that the CFR has been influenced and instrumental in setting the context for significant government decisions and serving as a recruiting ground for high-ranking officials. So Allen seizes on this admission to argue that the CFR's members are effectively drilling in a specific line of strategy, which they would then carry out in Washington, D.C. This suggests that the CFR is not just a think tank, but a powerful entity that determines the direction of U.S. foreign policy. As World War II approached, the Round Table Group, a British secret society with similar goals, worked to ensure that Hitler was not stopped early, thereby precipitating the war. This aligns with the interests of pushing for a world government, as another global conflict would provide the chaos needed to justify such an organization. Allen points out that financing for Hitler's rise to power through the Warburg-controlled Mendelssohn Bank of Amsterdam, and later the J. Henry Schroeder Bank, which had ties to the U.S. through firms like Sullivan and Cromwell, where influential figures like John Foster and Alan Dulles were senior partners. With the Round Table's efforts in Europe, the CFR focused on ensuring the U.S. would not make the same mistake it made after World War I by failing to establish a lasting global governance structure. The CFR began infiltrating the U.S. State Department as early as 1939, 2 years before the U.S. entered World War II, through a committee on post-war problems that was suggested and staffed by the CFR. By the time the U.S. officially entered the war, this committee had evolved into an advisory committee on post-war foreign policies, entirely composed of CFR members. And that should freak you out. This committee was responsible for designing the United Nations, which Allen describes as, quote, the first major successful step on the road to a world superstate. The founding of the United Nations in San Francisco in 1945 is a pivotal moment in Allen's narrative, as it marks the CFR's first significant achievement towards establishing global governance. At least 47 CFR members were among the American delegates at the founding of the UN, which including prominent figures like Harold Stassen, John J. McCloy, and Alger Hiss, who was later revealed to be a communist spy. Allen notes that the Communist Party's official theoretical journal, called Political Affairs, instructed its members to build up popular support for the UN and to ensure opposition was rendered impotent in the Senate. This endorsement from the Communist Party, Allen suggests, reveals the UN's true nature as a tool for internationalists, including those with communist sympathies. Furthermore, the CFR's members were present at critical wartime conferences such as Tehran, Potsdam, and Yalta. I'm sure I'm getting pronunciations wrong, where decisions were made that delivered millions into the hands of Joseph Stalin, vastly extending the reach of the international communist conspiracy. There's a lot to kind of, like, this is a big web, and it's kind of hard to keep all together, but man, very, very interesting. So Allen highlights the role of Lachlan Curry, an administrative assistant to FDR and a CFR member who was later identified by J. Edgar Hoover as a Soviet agent. This connection underscores the extent to which CFR members were entwined with both U.S. foreign policy and Soviet interests. Over the decades, the CFR's dominance of the State Department has been nearly absolute. Every Secretary of State since World War II, and this is as of 1971 when the book was written, but every Secretary of State from World War II, 1971, since World War II, with a few exceptions, has been a CFR member. Even those who were not members, like William Rogers, were surrounded by CFR members, such as Harry Kissinger, who served as President Nixon's chief foreign policy advisor. Allen asserts that the CFR's control extends beyond the State Department to other critical areas of government, academia, and media, all working towards the same ultimate goal, a world government controlled by the insiders and their allies. The CFR's long-term objective, as Allen reveals through the study published by the organization in 1959, is to create this new international order that includes states identifying as socialist or communist. This goal, Allen argues, is tantamount to abolishing the United States as a sovereign nation, replacing it with a global government that would erode constitutional guarantees of liberty. And it's interesting that it doesn't seem to always, it's not like we just vote something in and it's all gone in one time, but that it's this slow bleed. And if you're reading this as a Christian, this should ring true with the things to happen in the last days. And if you are a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, it should also ring true as it kind of echoes the things happening with the Gadianton robbers, which again we are meant to be worried about and concerned with and aware of in the last days. So finally, Allen lists the international banking organizations with ties to the CFR, including Kuhn, Loeb and Company, Lazard Freres, or Freres, whatever it is, Freres, Dillon Reed, Lehman Brothers, Goldman Sachs, Chase Manhattan Bank, Morgan Guaranty Bank, and others. These financial institutions, many with direct affiliations to European banking dynasties like the Rothschilds, have vested interests in the CFR's success as it aligns with their goals of consolidating power and influence on a global scale. So at the conclusion of this chapter, for this last portion, Gary Allen exposes the deep entanglement of major corporations, leftist organizations, and the Council on Foreign Relations, the CFR. Allen lists an array of prominent American organizations, such as Standard Oil, IBM, General Electric, and Xerox, among others, whose leaders are members of the CFR. This inclusion is significant because these corporations, often seen as bastions of capitalism, are interlinked with an organization accused of pushing a socialist and a globalist agenda. Allen highlights the apparent contradiction. Why would leaders of capitalist join enterprises join forces with figures from openly socialist organizations like the Fabian Socialist Americans for Democratic Action or the League of Industrial Democracy? The answer, Allen suggests, is that the CFR represents a convergence of power where our ideological differences are secondary to the overarching goal of establishing a global order. This is a point that Allen repeatedly underscores. The CFR acts as a unifying force, bringing together seemingly disparate entities under a common objective, the advancement again of this world government. The CFR's ability to operate with near total anonymity, despite its significant influence, is not accidental, and it's key. Allen meticulously details how the CFR is interlocked with major media corporations, including NBC, CBS, The Washington Times, Washington Post, and Time Magazine, among others. These media outlets, which have the power to shape public perception, are complicit in maintaining the CFR's secrecy. Allen argues that the media complicity is why so few Americans are aware of the CFR's existence or its role in shaping U.S. and global policies. The example of Adolph OCHS, who established the New York Times, was with financial backing from Kuhn Loeb and Company and Morgan Guarantee, illustrates the control wielded by financial elites over the media. This control ensures that the public remains oblivious to the CFR's true purpose and influence. The media's role, as Allen sees it, is to act as landscape painters, creating a facade that obscures the CFR's activities and intentions, thereby preventing public scrutiny. Allen then turns his attention on the political landscape, arguing that the two-party system in the United States is in reality just the illusion of choice. He asserts that while grassroots Democrats and Republicans may hold different views, these differences diminish as one ascends the party hierarchy. At the highest levels, both parties are controlled by the same CFR affiliated elites, rendering the distinctions between them superficial. Allen supports this claim by listing prominent Democrats and Republicans who are CFR members, including the Kennedy family, Dean Acheson, Richard Nixon, and Harry Kissinger. And I wonder if this would have been written in 2024, what this chapter may look like, but very interesting to see. And in light of things like Ezra's Eagle, again, if you're interested in that sort of thing, it goes along with the one wing with the 14 feathers, who would be largely influenced by perhaps this very group that we are talking about, until we get the other wing. This assertion ties back to Allen's earlier point about Colonel House's vision of a political system with two parties but a single ideology, world socialism. According to Allen, this vision has been realized in contemporary American politics, where the CFR's influence ensures that both parties ultimately serve the same globalist agenda. We've been warned about this forever, but if you listen to people like that, or if you hear people speaking about it, they're labeled conspiracy theorists. I'm sure some people would label what I'm doing feeding into the same sort of thing. But again, it's like there must be a reason why it gets so viciously attacked. So we're going to close out here pretty quick. Alan introduces the Bilderbergs, an international counterpart to the CFR, as another key player to the globalist movement. And I'm sure you've heard of them. Founded by Prince Bernhard in the Netherlands in 1954, the Bilderbergs are described as a secretive group of political financial elites from the United States and Western Europe who meet annually to coordinate efforts towards establishing a world government. The group includes influential figures like David Rockefeller, Norma McNamara, and Baron Edmund de Rothschild. And as you go further into that, like just on a tangent, like there's so many weird occult sort of rumors of rituals and odd things that are more than just these meetings that are going on to control things, but that there is actually some very, very dark, spiritually dark things that that happen as well, which, I can't corroborate that sort of stuff, certainly. But, it does seem like it's more than just a smoky room sometimes when you hear about some of these things. So what is striking about the Bilderbergs, according to Alan, is the lack of media coverage and public awareness about their very existence. Despite this significant influence on global policy, the Bilderbergs operate in almost complete secrecy, protected by a security network and shielded from public scrutiny. Allen suggests that this secrecy is deliberate, as the group's goals would likely provoke public outrage if they were more widely known. In 1971, the date that this book was written, the Bilderberg meeting at Rockefeller's took place in Woodstock Inn Lawrence Rockefeller's Woodstock Inn in Vermont, which Allen describes serves as a case study in this secrecy. The meeting, attended by figures like Harry Kissinger, was ostensibly about international peace, but, according to Allen, actually dealt with international finance. The aftermath of the meeting saw significant geopolitical shifts, including Kissinger's visit to China and the devaluation of the U.S. dollar, both of which Allen implies were orchestrated at this very meeting by the Bilderbergs. So in wrapping up Chapter 5, Allen emphasizes that the world is governed ultimately by a small elite group of individuals who operate behind the scenes, far removed from the public eye. He cites British statesman Benjamin Disraeli's observation that the quote, the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes, close quote. This quote encapsulates Allen's thesis that the real power in the world is held by a network of elites who manipulate global events to further their own interests, often in ways that are hidden from the public. Interesting to see President Benson push this book so hard. Allen's commentary concludes with a stark warning. The same elites who have orchestrated wars and powerful crises in the past continue to wield power today, with the ultimate goal of establishing a world government. That's always the goal. The CFR and Bilderbergs are central to this effort, and their influence extends across political, financial, and media institutions. For Allen, understanding this hidden network is crucial to resisting its agenda and preserving national sovereignty and international freedoms, or individual freedoms. And it makes sense that this would be the key focus of this book, rather than worrying necessarily about what we vote in, which is important, and I don't want to diminish that. But it's not that if we vote the wrong person in, suddenly it's about like it's just based on that one person, but it's really about wondering what's behind the scenes and what might be propping up and why they are propping up certain people, rather than those people really being like they're influenced, I guess I should say. Like they're influenced from people behind the scenes. So is there any relevance to 2024? While this book was written in 1971, many of the themes discussed in Chapter 5 certainly resonate today. The concept of powerful elites influencing global events and policies remains a topic of debate, especially in the context of globalization, the role of international organizations, and the influence of major financial institutions on government policy. The idea of media complicity, though less covert in today's digital age, is still relevant, and maybe even more, as discussions about media ownership, bias, and control persist. And that's the reason why you can't even watch talk shows and things, because it's all just become controlled. It all goes towards that narrative, and it's so obvious now that it makes it hard to really watch any of it. In 2024, the CFR and similar organizations are still viewed with suspicion by some who believe that these groups wield undue influence over global affairs. The rise of populist movements and skepticism towards globalization can be seen as a modern response to the concerns that this author is raising and has raised over 50 years ago. Furthermore, the convergence of corporate and political power, as well as the blurring of ideological lines, the blurring of ideological lines between major political parties are issues that continue to shape political discourse in the United States and beyond. And remember what he said, that in 1971, the Democratic and Republican Party platforms more resembled what we have in the Communist Party of 1930s, right? And it's like, even though we vote for either one, and if you look at them today, in a lot of ways, it's like we've even gone even further down that road. So it's just like this slow leftward shift, which is it's something to watch and see right in front of us. So for contemporary readers, this book certainly can be seen as a historical perspective that informs current discussions about power, governance, and the influence of elites in shaping the world order. While some of the specifics might be dated today, the underlying concerns about transparency, accountability, and the concentration of power remain as pertinent as ever. What's the next chapter? Let me bring that up here. Next chapter we have is called The Rockefellers and the Reds. And I'll see you then.